everyone. Welcome back to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. It is Monday, July 8th, 2024. Hope everyone had a great holiday weekend. It was a long weekend, so I hope you enjoyed it. Today, Jeff is going to discuss the upcoming energies for this week, and our topic this week is brutal Pluto, the planet to watch throughout 2024. Now, I think a lot of you who have been listening to Jeff know that Pluto has had a large hand in a lot of events that have been going on since 2020. But Pluto is truly a brutal planet. Can be great too, but it's brutal. And Jeff's going to point out just why it is. So take it away, Jeff.
All right. Thanks for that. Yeah, we got a lot of stuff coming up, and wow, what a crazy week we've had. I mean, the whole world got to see fumbling, bumbling Joe Biden, and of course, that debate. So, it's really been, I think, a political haywire and almost like the Twilight Zone in some senses. So we're really seeing the election heating up, and we're going to be talking a lot about that in the future. And clearly, as I've been mentioning, we got a lot of energies coming at us that are really powerful, that have never happened before, quite like they're happening now. And that definitely relates to brutal Pluto. So we'll get into that in a minute. But we actually got a first quarter moon coming up this Saturday on the 13th on Pacific time. It's going to be right about 10 minutes to 4 or 3:49 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Extrapolate depending on where you are. Again, I always pay attention to the new moons, the quarters, the fulls, and the three-quarter moons. They have a real energy to them. And of course, the first quarter is where we're building out energy. It's starting to move towards the full moon, which is a crescendo of energy. That happens every month. So very powerful to watch that. And that's also happening literally the day after Mars, which I've been mentioning, enters into sidereal Taurus. And this is a big deal. And the reason why is we'd mentioned a few podcasts ago, and I've been briefly mentioning in the last, that Uranus every 84 years enters the sidereal sign of Taurus. And when it does, the world seems to go through a lot of changes, mayhem, chaos, and wars. Again, I mentioned the last time it happened 84 years ago, World War II. 84 before that, Civil War. 84 before that, we had the Independence War, Revolutionary War. And of course, 84 before that, we can see the mayhem that was going on in the monarchies in Europe. And I actually went back further, and I always found super tumultuous times every 7-year period that Uranus is in the Pleiades and also the sidereal sign of Taurus. So, and why this is a big deal is because Mars joins Uranus in the very first portion of Taurus. In fact, it actually joins it right around, 4 to 6 a.m., depending which, time zone you are on the east or west coast of the United States. If you're somewhere else in the world, extrapolate accordingly. But why is that significant? Because Mars and Uranus together, it's like flipping matches over an open can of gasoline. Very, very powerful. And Mars is going to join Uranus just after that. It's actually on the 15th, it'll join Uranus. And that's the big one. Why? That'll be on Monday. And of course, why is that important? Because Mars and Uranus joining are going to sweep right into that fixed star Capit-Algo, one of the most evil stars in the sky. But sticking with our topic tonight, it's also happening, all of this, in the middle of July as the second Pluto return on the United States happens. And again, if anyone's, watching closely, our world has been definitely transformed into a very destructive, chaotic place. And it's really saddening to see this country be infiltrated, the police being, decimated, and crime raising to the roof here in major metropolitan cities. I was just talking to someone this morning in San Francisco, and they're literally telling me the college dorms are being infiltrated with many of these gang members that are coming from foreign countries. And the students are really having a problem with it. I talked to another police officer who was telling me the San Francisco County area is just mayhem. It's just absolutely the destruction of a city. And of course, we're hearing the same thing in other parts of the country in major cities. And people say, well, there's nothing to worry about. Everything is fine. But it's not. I mean, when we see this, this is the destructive powers of Pluto. And it relates to what's going on right now. Because as Caput Algol is conjuncted by both Mars and then shortly thereafter, Uranus, we could see some real trouble. And this is globally too, not just for the United States. The whole world is going to feel this. Again, the last time that Uranus entered and went across these seven sisters that I mentioned in the Pleiades, very powerful. We had Europe exploding in war. We had Japan, about ready to attack the United States shortly thereafter. So this is a very dangerous time right now. Hopefully nothing happens, but it certainly could. Which also brings me to the topic tonight. Pluto is such a really unusual planet because it was discovered by accident in 1930 by a guy named Clyde Tombaugh. And what they found is they were paying attention to a star cluster, and one of the stars was moving much more rapidly because stars hardly ever move. They move 1 degree every 72 years due to precession. But they noticed this one was moving. And that's how Pluto was discovered. So they actually didn't discover it by examining it. They discovered it by noticing that there was a star moving. And Pluto, of course, is very, very distant. They claim there's actually more planets to be discovered. And Pluto always is synonymous with the birth of the nuclear age. A lot of people tie that together because that's right when the whole, design of the nuclear weapons and refining uranium and all this. So there's a lot of correlations to that. And it kind of fits because Pluto is exceedingly destructive and transformative. Now, in 2006, a bunch of astronomers got together and decided, hey, it's not a planet anymore. It's a dwarf, right? But I have to tell you, my observation in almost 50 years of observing astrology, is Pluto really brutal? It sure seems to be. Also, if we go back in time, Pluto literally shows up in so many events. For instance, just take recently, the COVID-19 pandemic actually broke out precisely when the Saturn-Pluto conjunction happened. That was in 2020, right in January. Even though it might have happened before, that's when it was announced and when it became manifest in the world. Now, when I look back in history, Nixon took us off the gold standard with a hard Saturn-Pluto aspect. Also, 9/11 happened on a Saturn-Pluto opposition. The Federal Reserve Act and World War I were right next to another Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So this happens about every 38 years when Saturn and Pluto come together because of the speeds of both Saturn and Pluto. But I'm here to tell you, Pluto does show up. Even though it wasn't discovered until 1930, it shows up in a lot of historical events as we go back and correlate them. Also, too, one of the things that's very interesting is if you look at the glyph of Pluto, it is the sun over the crescent of the moon, over the cross, which always means transformation. Every time I have had someone who moves near a Pluto line, and in location astrology, you can get ascending, which is personal, midheaven, which is career, descending, which is partnerships and relationships, or it can be on the fourth house cusp known as the IC, always brings tumultuous issues with home and family. So basically, yes, the answer is it brutal? I really think it's transformative. And there's nothing trivial about Pluto. And again, look at what's been happening in this country alone. And if we go backwards in time, the Roman Empire was dissolved or destroyed on the second Pluto return that it had. And even the first one, a lot of trouble. So Pluto always tends to make things go through a meltdown and a rebirth, or it's death and rebirth. And that's probably the best way to look at it. I know I had a Pluto descending transit through where I was living, And I remember saying a number of years ago, I'm going to have Pluto on the descendant come through. And boy, did it come through. Every single client I ever talked to who has a Pluto transit or progression really feels it. I was just talking to another person this morning, had a Pluto, what we call solar arc direction, moving through her location. And now it's separating major transformations. People feel it. Now, is it bad or is it good? Well, transformation, if it's reacted to properly, can actually be good. And it can also be destructive. One of the analogies I always use, if you've ever melted down metal, which I do a lot for gemstone, pendants and rings, the metal is completely molten. It loses all of its shape and then it's recast and cools. That's a good analogy for Pluto because Pluto does that. It literally transforms whatever is there. And it's interesting, on the tree of life, a lot of people who study the modern Kabbalah equate Pluto to the upper Sephira known as Keter, which is the transformation of the soul. And also, it is believed Metatron, the archangel, which is total transformation, is synonymous with that. Is it? Well, I have to say there is some real parallels there. So it's powerful, powerful stuff. And look what happened last night, right, Ella? Remember that?
Oh, yeah, no, that tanker just blew up.
Yeah. On a moon opposition Pluto, yeah.
On a moon opposition Pluto. The minute we heard about that, well, you were heading home last night. You were on the road, and you let me know that the traffic was way backed up.
It was like a sea. You couldn't move. I saw this truck saying, "Do not go forward. The freeway's blocked," but it was too late. I didn't have any exits. You only go one way. And as I went up the hill on the 405, I started seeing just a sea of cars. And thank God I was on a motorcycle because I was able to put the four ways on and go in between. These people have been sitting there 3-4 hours and they couldn't move. So I was lucky. I was able to go up to an exit way up ahead, cutting through everyone. And there were people exiting, but very, very slowly. It was just blocked. And I was able to take the back roads and get home. But yeah, I mean, this is what we could see.
Yeah, it was a moon opposition Pluto. So the minute we looked into what was going on there, because you couldn't see yet what was happening, but it was posted all over the internet that tanker blew. Yeah. Right away, I was like, okay, was it moon opposed Pluto when that happened, or was it moon opposed Mars? Because I know it would be one of the two for sure. Yeah. Well,
yeah, they're intense.
This is all like really, really intense, and it just shows the power of all of the planets. But Pluto, when we say it's the planet to watch throughout 2024, what can we, in quotes, expect from Pluto?
Well, again, the biggest one right now is the 3 times Pluto is conjuncting the United States birth chart. It did so last January, right into February. The second hit is happening literally next week, in the middle of July. Very slow, very powerful. See, it takes 245 to 250 years for Pluto to go around the solar system. It's called a synodic cycle. It's a fancy term for how long does it take to go around the solar system. That's a long time. None of us are going to live in these bodies, at least, to see that happen to a birth chart. But to a country or a city, that can definitely happen. And of course, the United States just turned 248 years old this 4th of July, just a few days ago. So what's significant about this is with it returning to the United States birth chart Pluto, it's bringing total transformation and meltdown to this country. And of course, the second hit is where the actions happen. See, a lot of times these outer transits happen in threes. Why? The first hit is the initiation. The second hit is the transformation. And the third is the integration and result. So we had the first hit just at the beginning of this year. The second hit is happening right now. That's where the action happens. And it's happening with the confluence of Uranus and Mars on this fixed star. And I have to tell you, the Pluto return on the United States is right next to that star of Caput Algol. Very, very powerful. Secondly, we also have to look at the third and final hit is going to happen when? Right at the end of this year, almost exactly on the 1st of 2025. It's right at the end of 2024. So this is a really powerful, transformative year. That's one of the first things I look at when I do readings. I'll look at all the major outer planets and transits and progressions and also doshas. And anytime I see Pluto conjuncting the moon, squaring, or making hard aspects, I know that that person's going to be going through their respective transformations. If I see it doing positive things, now here's some good news. When it's trining Jupiter or trining something positive like the sun, I find great growth. I remember a number of years ago, I had a friend, he had Pluto trining Mars. And I said, you're going to be Popeye on spinach. And he did. He made millions of dollars. Why? Set up a company, made all this money. Pluto trine Mars. Invigorating, powerful. If it's trining the sun, you're going to personally really excel. So it also has I always say Pluto is raw power. One of the best analogies that I use, take a magnifying glass and take a piece of paper in the sunlight and just focus it. That's raw power. That's how Pluto acts. It almost acts like an amplifier to anything it's with. So when you see it in your birth chart, either making aspects to a certain house ingress or to a certain planet in your chart, it's going to empower it, either for good or powerful transformation on hard aspects. So it's really one to watch, no doubt. And they can demean it all they want for being a planet. I can tell you, I'm here to tell you this thing has a lot of punch. It always shows up. It's not a figment of anyone's imagination. I had a lady, she moved on a Mars-Pluto latitude crossing. She said, what the heck is going on? I said, you just moved into the fire. I said, that is like so intense. And she said it was absolutely off the charts intense. I had another guy, he moved to a location on a Mars-Pluto line. And he said, I can't believe it. He said, the road rage. He said, I'm always getting in fights with people and they're getting angry with me. He almost got in a fist fight with a guy at a gas station. I said, welcome to Mars Pluto. It's just really powerful. It strengthens whatever it's with, and belief is not required.
Belief is not required. See, this is why it's so important to know what's going on in your chart, to know what's coming, so you can be on the lookout. And you said something earlier about the reaction to something being important. And that is what's important. It's our reaction. It's our response to whatever situation, we're being faced with at the moment, because our reaction changes everything.
That's right.
Everything.
That is exactly right. In fact, one of the things that I love studying about Nadi astrology is all causation is mental. And do we have free will? You bet we do. Because the most powerful thing in the universe is how we react to something. And if we react in a more appropriate way, just like driving a car, you're going to avoid an accident or, adjust your conditions. In fact, you talk to people in the military, that's one of their main things is intelligence, is how to react to a given situation in the appropriate response. And that's the same thing I like to look at with astrology. That's why I love psychology as well. We had Carlin on here just recently. And that's what I love about psychology and psychiatry is we're all dealing with our emotions. We're all dealing with our life and our responses. And life can throw some crazy stuff at all of us. Life ain't easy on planet Earth, right? But if we have an insight into the terrain we're in, your expectations are more in alignment and your responses are more intelligent. And that's so key. And I always find Pluto can be intense. And that's the word. It's intensity. So, and again, we say brutal Pluto, but it's really intense Pluto would be the best words for it.
I choose brutal because Pluto has been really brutal on me. So I choose brutal. We can call it intense, but I choose Pluto.
Yeah, I have to concur on that one.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks so much for this, Jeff. I know you had to be brief this week. Thanks everyone for joining us today and on Mondays. Please leave your comments below. Have a great week ahead, and we'll see you soon. We'll see you next time on Astrology Today with Jeff Harman.